Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us through the late hours of the afternoon. We have a fantastic panel here this afternoon. It's small but intimate, and we're going to discuss some issues around how we think about the green supply chain, how we think about the energy transition, and how we think about the role of women in it. I've got two fantastic panelists, Owen Omogiafo, nailed it, and Angela Wilkinson. I will let them both give a little bit on their background before we jump into questions.
Thank you, Olivia. Good evening, everyone. My name is Owen Omogiafo, and I'm from Nigeria. And my capacity, I'm the President and Group CEO of Transcorp PLC. Transcorp is Nigeria's largest listed diversified conglomerate. We have investments in power, hospitality, and energy. We are very big on the energy transition, on the perspective of how do we bridge and deal with the energy poverty in Africa. I'm happy to be here today to share with you and to hear from others in the audience.
Thanks, Owen. I'm Angela Wilkinson. I'm the Secretary General. I'm the first female Secretary General in 100 years of the World Energy Council.
Very impressive.
Youngest first female CEO of
Best
Also
CEO.
very impressive.
Two firsts, right?
Yes.
I was also the first woman to go to university in my family. And I think that we're here talking about supply chains, and I'm happy to have that conversation. I would like also to talk about the role of women outside of supply chains during this conversation as designers and owners rather than just service providers, and also as users of these things, and how we tend to look at women in the middle of these value chains, but not in terms of the real value generative ends of them.
Great. Look forward to it. So maybe while we're on that topic, what does a green supply chain look like? And how should we think about the cost implications around that?
But what is a green, well, what is a supply chain? Anything that takes raw materials, runs it through a couple of processing steps and ends up with retail, right? But the people who use whatever it is, they're called customers. And the people who own it, they're called the owners. They're not in the supply chain. So those are the steps inside a supply chain. And a green supply chain, different definitions of what we mean by green or clean or net zero or sustainable. But I think that everybody gets the idea that actually it's not just the use, but also the manufacturing and production of something that has to minimize its emissions and pollution. But increasingly, that's not enough. It's also got to regenerate nature and social good.
So thank you, Olivia. I like the use of the word minimize, because when you look at it, trying to get to a world where it's totally, end-to-end green supply chain, it's a bit tricky. Because when you think of even with like the electric vehicles and every other thing that today is helping the world get to net zero, there's an origin story of how did you get there. So we have our electric vehicles, the electricity used to power it. What's the source? So we're moving closer, indeed, to getting to that net zero. And just like you stated, watching the society, watching nature, and everything that we're doing, ability to regenerate. So it's almost like it's reproducing and healing itself, which is critical. Now, for me, in my business, supply chain is very critical. We are in electricity, and we are committed to providing power to the 220 million people in Nigeria. And how do we get that power to the last mile user? The energy transition conversation is very huge. And the core of this is access, equitable access to power for everyone across the world, no matter your social status or your economic status. As I was coming on this panel, I started looking more around the conversation. How do we make power cheaper? And the cost on the supply chain goes a long way towards getting there. As we're doing the transition today, we need to ask ourselves, are we going to jettison all the billions of investment that has gone on for decades? Or are we going to be thinking more around how do we refine the way energy is generated, the way energy is distributed, and the way energy is used in a way that can drive the regenerative powers that you have talked about in your own statement, Olivia.
Very interesting. You made me think of something. We talk a lot about this transition we're trying to go through very quickly, right? We're trying to transition these economies, over a matter of decades, right? And this is energy infrastructure, for example, that's been built over centuries. It's tough. It's a big hill to climb. I think one of the things that can be very helpful in that is AI. How do you guys think about AI in some of the work that you all do?
Okay, can we just one step back first? Is we would say there are multiple energy transitions and additions, right? You've got to transition from something to something. But if you're transitioning from nothing to something, that's an addition, right? So it's transitions and additions that we're managing. And they're multi-speed, they're multi-resource, they're multi-technological, they're multi-stakeholder. That's what's going on. So where AI can come in and help is that's a huge amount of complexity and a huge amount of potentially different data sources. So the complex coordination challenge is really, really difficult. And AI AI models can help us with aggregating huge amounts of different types of data, at identifying places where we can improve process efficiencies or other types of efficiencies, in monitoring, because you can have embedded service. So all of that's right. But AI has also got perils in it. It's got biases built into the algorithms. It's got things that it can't do. So AI, I think, is neither all good or all bad, just like there's no such thing as all good or all bad energy.
Thank you very much. Building on Angela's perspective, when you look at the world of energy, if you look at the entire value chain, from source to end user, you have a lot of data elements. There are a lot of moving parts. And when I think of the way we used to use data before, source, aggregate, rely on data, there's a whole lot. I dare say I probably just have to have, it to be like the days of the old computers, when the first computer filled a room. But today, our smartphones are computers. And that's where AI is going to take us to. It's going to take us towards better prediction, understanding who is where, what is the need, and how do we serve. Just going to go below the surface. It's going to look at my machines. So I've got huge gas turbines, right? Really big. So in the gas-fired plant, 1 megawatt of power, if I'm to buy a new, let's say, 20 megawatts turbine, 1 megawatt is $1 million. And fixing those machines can be very interesting. It's a matter of something going out and my engineers will come, hey, we have a catastrophic failure, versus them saying, look, we're hearing something in that machine, we need to turn it down whilst we are in control, as my dentist would say. And this is where I see AI coming in a whole lot, gathering the data, just like we have with airplanes. Airplanes use a lot of predictive data. They're going to be able to say, this is the pattern of the machine, this is the history, just like when we work with our doctors and they know our medical history, they run the tests. And way ahead of time, I know that this is how this machine is running. I'm able to predict it even with my investors, because I have to keep in mind with my investors. There are no surprises. I'm able to plan my businesses better. And AI can come up with more intuitive ways that I, as a decision maker, can have a greater handle on my business. And I know we've got to also talk about some things about technology coming up. Maybe I'll stop here before I go off on my soapbox.
No, that was great. And I'd love to hear, I think that was a great example of some of the things in your business that you're using AI and technology for. Any other ideas for other folks listening who might be looking at their own businesses or their own global view?
I would say AI is simplifying things. It's a bit scary. I'll be the first to say that as well. It's something new. But it's simplifying, it's bringing information closer to you. And you really don't need to learn, you don't have to fail today to learn. You can literally go onto a computer and learn from someone else's experience. I can go in and put in certain parameter. If I have this, if I have this, I have that, what should I expect as my prediction? And based on that, I go forward. So that would just be my own take. It can greatly reduce your R&D costs and your life experiences. I don't know if Angela would like to.
I think we're seeing a lot of use of AI in terms of predictive maintenance, rather than having to close it down when do you intervene ahead of the game. That's very efficient. I think there's a different, the scary bit of AI is the generative AI, not the stuff that's just processing previous historical patterns and finding efficiency gains or predictive maintenance, but when AI itself is starting to make the decisions rather than augmenting the decisions. That's when people get concerned. And we have to remember, data is of the past. So all the data that we're collecting is about the past. Well, I would like to see a future where 50% of women are making the decisions, 50% of women are owning the assets, 50% of women are being included in buyer decision making. And AI isn't going to do that for us because there is no historical data. So you can't rely just on AI to think about how you manage a transition. You've got to use a little bit of disciplined imagination. And even the electric vehicle story, yes, there's an electric vehicle supply chain, but shouldn't we be asking ourselves, do we really subscribe to Elon Musk's model of trickle down, that somehow men who like driving fast cars and electric vehicles are somehow going to prototype the future for the rest of us? Or should we be asking, what do women want energy use for you to use energy for in the future, and then design a couple of systems around that?
That's a great idea. So maybe picking up on that a little bit and pivoting to this discussion of women and energy and power. You know, one of the things that I love is for our energy transition and decarbonization funds at Apollo, we get a larger percentage of female resumes than any other fund that I manage. I love that. And I think it's an area of real passion for a lot of women. Can you talk a little bit about why you think this sector has become such a passion for women globally, and perhaps some examples that you've seen of really women participating in the energy transition?
You want to go first?
With my over 60 years of history to
Please,
talk from.
indeed.
So when I first entered the world, so how did I get into energy? Maybe that's a story to start with. You know, why did I get into energy? So, you know, I'm a physicist by training, and I did some of the first climate change impact assessments in the world back in the 1980s, pre-COP days. And I got genuinely concerned because people and trees can't move that far in a very short period of time to adapt to the effect. So I started to think about, well, how do I make a change in this space? And that led me into energy, right? I didn't start off in energy. I went into the world of energy because it has huge transformational potential. And I've had to learn a lot along the way. You know, I thought science spoke truth to power. I learned a whole lot about policy making. I learned a lot about where decisions are made. We have these theories of change and decision making which just aren't real in the real world, and they get talked about everywhere. So I think women are attracted to the sustainability agenda because women are very purpose-driven, in my experience, and very nurture-driven, right? But that doesn't mean to say that they're schmucks, right? They want a decent deal. They are clever and bright and talented, and they want to be appreciated. But I run the World Energy Council. We operate in a very male-dominated space, but my secretariat is full of women because women are genuinely trying to host the future in the present in a very different way.
Thank you. So for me, energy is a catalyst. Catalyst for development, catalyst for peace, catalyst for growth. And like you said, women are nurturers. But I think I'll go back a bit, and I'm going to look at the context of my country and my continent. I would say we're getting more interest in energy from women now because we are likely also having more women in science. Historically, women went for the soft courses because we were raised to be the homemakers. But as change has been coming on and there's more focus on women development, you find that we are now studying more of the sciences, more of the engineering courses, and you also have people like me who've come from a pure social science background. I've got a first degree in sociology and anthropology, a second degree in human resource management, but I know how to run business. I know how to lead with a heart. I run a conglomerate that our purpose is to improve lives and transform Africa. So every day I get out of bed, every day I'm talking to my team, what have we done today to improve lives, to transform Africa? So when you have that heart and that sense of purpose, no matter the challenge that's put in front of you, of course, you're not going to come and become a neurosurgeon because that requires like some real deep skills. You're able to energize. And as women, we do have, I think we have an advantage in leadership because right from when we are young kids, you're given a doll. You're taught to nurture, you're taught to develop, you're taught to grow, you're taught to multiply things. And if I take that into the leadership role that we're seeing more and more women play today, it's basically a system of our time is now. And as we are very dedicated at what we do, we have to, we do work harder. I mean, no offense to the gentlemen in the room, none whatsoever, but I'm married, 21 years, I've got 3 children. It's quite a bit of effort to sit and be that woman leader and at the same time look after the home or feel connected to your children. And we make sacrifices on a daily basis to continue to stay in that leadership role. And if you've made a sacrifice, what are you going to do? You're going to make it count. I believe that we are also very good. Contrary to what people say that women don't support women, I don't believe that. That's not my story. That's not my experience. We are quite good, excellent actually, at reaching out and pulling people along. As I became the group CEO of Transco, I looked at my power business and I realized that the female representation was very small. Compared to my hospitality business, where I had a lot more women, I mean, yeah. Now, what am I trying to do? We've started a Catch Them Young program where we are going into the universities through our Transco Intern X program, and we are bringing more people to fore. All right? So we catch them young. When they're about 18, 19, as part of their university degree, they encounter a power plant. When they are done with school, they are more likely to come in. Once upon a time, women couldn't go on rigs for those in the oil and gas. And I know this because a friend of mine, she's just as stubborn as I am. She studied chemical engineering, and she insisted on going on the rig. Then we look at the entrepreneurship program, the Tony Elumelu Foundation Entrepreneurship Program. We've been more intentional about bringing women on board. The first time we ran the application, only about 20%. We completed our first tranche of funding, and we ended up with 50% of male and women. And what's interesting, we have more women driving the green energy sustainability industry than the men. So I think it's about our nurturing nature.
That's great. I love those examples.
Can I just add one?
Yeah, please.
One other characteristic for women to think about is you spend the first 20 years of your life having to listen to everybody and being lectured. And when you get into a position of authority, you decide you're going to listen to somebody else rather than lecture them. I think active listening and listening, hearing things, I think that's I think women are very good at practicing active listening because they don't have a choice about it for many years.
I agree. I mean, this is not the topic of the discussion, but I think women make very good bosses for that exact reason. I think they listen to what their teams want. They listen to what their clients or their constituents need. I think it's an important quality. We're running out of time here. I had a couple very quick questions for you, a little bit of a mini lightning round here. As we look at new technologies going forward, is there anything that you guys are watching very closely that you think could be a real game changer?
I'm looking at laser modeling. It's going to make my trial and error process much shorter and solve my problems.
I'm not a tech watcher. What I do is I talk, you mentioned female entrepreneurs before. We run a startup energy transition scheme across the world. It's globalized, lots of women applicants. I listen to what's the conversation, and in the last year, the conversation has been that in trying to get to scale, there is absolute prejudice and discrimination against female entrepreneurs from venture capitalists because they have to have co-founders and co-owners. Come on, guys. Women can run things on their own. Women can found things on their own. So I think that's more, it's not so much the technology watching, it's the technology system, innovation system that I'm watching.
Great. Well, I think that's a wonderful note to end it on. Very much appreciate the color from both of you. Thank you to our excellent panelists for a wonderful conversation this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.